Dear friends, dear viewers of Baku Network platform, we are joining you from Parliament of Azerbaijan together with my colleague, Ms. Sevil Mikhailova, member of Azerbaijani Parliament. And today we have a special guest joining us from Mongolia, from Ulaanbaatar, Mr. Tsogbatar Damdin. He is the member of Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE. At the same time, he's the member of Parliament from Mongolia and chairman of the Standing Committee on Legal Affairs. Mr. Tsogbatar also served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia from 2017 to 2020. Mr. Tsogbatar, welcome to Baku Network. It's indeed our great honor and privilege having you today in our platform. We are broadcasting this program from the Parliament of Azerbaijan, and this is the first time that we have such an esteemed Minister of Foreign Affairs and Member of Parliament from Mongolia joining us. And Mr. Tsogbatar, I will start also by saying that because we are members of the OSCE PA and as also members of Azerbaijani Parliament, representing Azerbaijan at the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, for example, my colleague Sevil Mikhailova, myself also at the OSCE PA and the European Parliament, we are seeing the rise of populism, the rise of ultra-right and ultra-left political ideologies reigning supreme in the European organizations. And frankly speaking, seeing such a member of OSCE PA like yourself as professional diplomat, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia, previously served in your country, it is very important for us to have more experienced diplomats, politicians in different platforms, because as we are seeing again in European organizations, this dangerous trend of rising populism, bringing more populist, these unprofessional politicians into agenda, threatens not only the security of the European organizations, but also bigger Eurasian geography. So, Mr. Tsogbatar, first of all, I would like to ask you to tell about your vision, how we politicians in Mongolia, in Azerbaijan, in different parts of the world can play an important role promoting parliamentary diplomacy and preventing this kind of very dangerous trends in the European platforms, because we see how these ideologies negatively affect the political decisions, the decision-making process, and we, like Azerbaijani, Mongolian parliamentarians, have to fight against these trends. Please.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me for this dialogue, and it is really my pleasure and honor also to be part of this discussion. And the question you raised is really very topical and very timely. You know, recently I got my article published in India, and the article is called Irrationalism and International Relations. In fact, if you Google it right under this two words, irrationalism and international relations, the first article that will appear will be my article. So what I'm really trying to say is that it's very unusual. Why it's coming up first? It's very unusual to look into international relations from irrationalist point of view, because everybody was presuming that diplomacy is highly professional work, and the whole system of international relations and the whole security system is based on presumption that countries are rational. People are rational. Our internal legal system and the economic system is built on the fact that we presume, you know, actors act rationally. But now we're going into the time of irrationalism. And well, one thing, when internally you had this populism, rise of populism, and people were offering it as a solution to more internationalizing, globalizing economy, that your economy is your economy, and therefore you should be protecting only your economy, nobody else matters, etc., irrespective of the fact that we were trying to build this bigger human family and human community. With the growth of globalization, this national sentiments understandably were rising. But the problem is that from internal populism, inevitably it has gotten transferred to international diplomacy. And that is much more dangerous, development than what we used to have nationally. Because, well, especially in democracies, you can have this populist trends, but with time, through the test of time, usually this populist ideas which do not withstand the test of life, they kind of fade away. They will always be there, but they do not take dominant role. But the problem is that with the economic difficulties, populism starts rising internally as political tool of gaining power and reaching power. And then, inadvertently, it really has gotten transferred to international field. Now, in international field, why irrationalism and this populism is dangerous, more dangerous than in internal politics. In internal politics, especially in democracies, when you are using populist arguments and you do not have restraint on your rhetoric vis-a-vis your other political opponents, this is not to be or not to be situation. This is just fight for political institutions within your country. But international security is built on, especially in the nuclear terms, is built on mutually assured destruction. There is no room for irrationalism. But unfortunately, in that system, when this populism enters the field of diplomacy, it really raises the issue of to be or not to be. Internally, that issue does not exist. At the international level, this issue exists. And this whole system of mutual, nuclear parity that started in 1970s, and then this system of mutually assured destruction rests only on the presumption of the fact of rationalism. And therefore, this rising populism at the international field is way more dangerous and far less tolerable than populism at the internal level. And these two distinctions must be made. In other words, when politics, very simple recipe here. In local politics, yes, in democratic systems, people may go populist. But if you have risen to the level of influencing or having some say in international affairs, you should not forget that that is far less tolerable at the international level. You cannot act the way you act in internal politics, because the risks and the stakes that are involved at the international level are far more, consequential and existential, in fact. So, therefore, yes, unfortunately, populism is there. Populism was always there, but the problem is that now it's becoming a way more influential trend. That is something that we should be aware of.
Exactly.
But also at the international cooperation level, we should remember that there is distinction between national politics and international politics.
Exactly. Sevil Hanım, Mr. Minister highlighted very important aspects of populism, fighting this threatening trend. So as politicians, we have to be very careful in our rhetoric, in our speeches. But unfortunately, we are seeing that, for example, as we are members representing Azerbaijani parliament and different European platforms, we are seeing this hate speech and Azerbaijanophobia, Turkophobia, mainly used by the European politicians, especially by French MEPs. So what I am trying to say that, like Mr. Minister was talking, I was thinking about the role of Mongolia and Azerbaijan in geopolitical terms. Like Azerbaijan is located between big superpowers like Russia in the north, Iran in the south. It is the same for Mongolia. Mongolia has neighbors north, Russia, and south is China. So for countries like Mongolia and Azerbaijan, I think that we have to be very pragmatic. Actually, we are, and we are conducting like Azerbaijan and Mongolia, I believe that we are conducting very pragmatic, constructive policy, especially the foreign policy. And how you would evaluate the current situation in the South Caucasus, taking into account that Azerbaijan has always been promoting and has always advocating for peaceful agenda with its neighbors, playing very important role, bringing different regions, connecting these regions through Azerbaijan while implementing, for example, transport communication projects. And I think that also Mongolia is a very important player in that region, connecting these big powers like Azerbaijan do. So how you would compare, maybe evaluate the situation currently in the South Caucasus, probably post-conflict situation also, because we have ended this conflict with Armenia and we have now very good perspectives to develop this situation.
First, I want to greet our colleague from Mongolia. Mr. Chokbatur was very correct in definitions of populism, politics, and diplomacy. And we cannot agree with you that really populism distracts the international security system, because the diplomats are the very people who works with words. But when the words actually serve not to security but to populism, then we are in the very dangerous situation because the words used in this diplomacy, and ultimately the diplomacy does not ultimately bring to building bridges between the nations, but destroying the bridges between the nations. And my colleague, Mr. Genjariya, was right also saying that that's what we are witnessing in international platforms, and we witnessed it at the OSCE, unfortunately, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, in the European Parliament, and other platforms, which is very dangerous. And we also, just before, saw when this kind of populism led to even wars, bloody conflicts. And believe me, the people who are using this populism either do not understand that the way the tools they use actually hurt people, or they knew and they continue doing that. And coming to our region, South Caucasus, you know, we suffered from conflict for 30 years, and in 2020, so at least we could restore the UN Security Council's resolutions, and they were implemented. Azerbaijan restored its sovereignty throughout its territory. Now a new page has opened in the life of South Caucasus. Now we need more peace, we need more diplomacy, we need more building bridges and confidence. But unfortunately, some countries now acting in the position of destructive populism, and they want to bring the tension, rather peace, to the South Caucasus. And it was just mentioned about France. Now French parliamentarians are very active in the European parliaments, calling for, pressuring on Azerbaijan, calling on very disobjective positions about Azerbaijan. But they forget about the role of Azerbaijan, that now playing for the European Union as well. We are the first and for now the only country who could diversify energy supplies to the European Union. So this is also part of the security system. Energy security actually for the time being I think has a critical role. Yes, we are speaking about the IT development, we are speaking about the economic development, about evolutions in other spheres, but they all depend on energy. We need to say it. And now Azerbaijan supports, Azerbaijan actually ensures the energy security. And I think they need to think twice about it and be interested in cooperation with Azerbaijan, be interested in security and peace in the South Caucasus, because without it we cannot develop, we cannot cooperate, we cannot go through. And the world for now is in the stage that we are interdependent in this or another way. For Mongolia, I want to say that so we are glad to state this fact. Our political courses are in the right direction. Azerbaijan has always said that if we start cooperations, then you need to be very, loyal. You need to be equal in your position, you need to respect, and you need to be respected.
Yes, exactly. Ms. Sevil Mikhailova described in detail the overall view of the South Caucasus peace post-conflict agenda. Mr. Minister, I would like for us to elaborate the strategic role of Mongolia also, because Sevil Hanım already described the situation in our region, vis-a-vis our relations with the European organizations. But I want you as a minister, former minister, being top diplomat, top official conducting foreign policy in your country, to elaborate the strategic of Mongolia. As I said, Mongolia is located between two super big powers, Russia and China. And as the confrontation between Russia and China on the one hand, and the West, NATO on the other hand, is widening, deepening, I think that the role of Mongolia, like the role of Azerbaijan in the South Caucasus, must be elaborated, and we have to define what strategic vision, what strategic direction Mongolia is going to take. Because, in this confrontation, you have to be very careful. You have to choose your foreign policy with an extreme care in not to put your country under the risk. So, for example, I can give you an example. In this case, we can also connect the dots, like between Azerbaijan and Mongolia. For example, Azerbaijan is now focusing its foreign policy, shifting its foreign policy from Euro-Atlantic space into the eastern direction. And now Azerbaijan, for example, is getting more engaged with the organization called SPECA. It is the countries of the Central Asia plus Afghanistan, thus connecting this geography, the bigger Eurasian geography, with Caucasus, with Azerbaijan. And I think that here we can also connect the dots with Mongolia, because both Mongolia and Azerbaijan is playing a very important role in connecting these very important projects. For example, Azerbaijan being a very important player in the middle corridor. Also Mongolia, for example, being a very important player as a transport country, like, Sila Sibiri, the strength of Siberia oil and gas pipeline is going from Russia through Mongolia and will reach China. So this is very important projects. Transportation and communication links are very important both for Mongolia and both for Azerbaijan. And here we have to redefine the geostrategic, the geopolitical position of our countries. So I would like you to elaborate for us, please. Mr. Minister.
Yeah. Well, indeed, it's, very often big countries really think that the issue of international politics is their realm. and smaller countries must sort of tag along with them. But, you know, when we take this international community, just by sheer number of states, you know, in the United Nations, we have 193 countries. Majority are us. Big powers, superpowers, there are very few number of them. In big human family, the majority are smaller countries and medium-sized countries. And really, it's just normal human approach to listen to each other. You should not be overheard or overlooked or missed out because you are small. You know, in every society, inclusiveness and human progress happened because humanity learned to have this inclusiveness in their society. In every society, even if it is not democratic or democratic, doesn't matter, but you know, people respect each other and they do not build their relationship for the thousands of years on the basis of physical strength and muscle. And look how far we have moved just by passing that biological, you know, instinct division between the powerful and not powerful. When we integrated the weaker into the system, we became strong human society and community. So therefore, the same applies to international relations as well. And when these smaller countries are heard, and naturally it will be difficult to be heard unless we cooperate with each other and we strengthen each other's voice and we, you know, approach the bigger international community with the, you know, invitation to talk, engage into dialogue, then it will make difference. And it has always actually made difference. You know, therefore, it will be very important to believe in ourselves, to believe in our unity. And we may have different, you know, approaches and issues, but if we unite those issues where we have commonality, and then approach with the idea of dialogue, not with the idea of confrontation. And smaller countries, because we lack that, you know, military might and power that bigger countries have, we will always be, our strength will be our brains. Therefore, for bigger countries, it's also would be useful to listen to the first, to the majority, and to the smaller countries, because they really will be relying on what they have. You know, we do not have this resource of military might behind us. Then we will always be trying to build dialogue, bridges, to engage diplomacy. You know, because when conflicts start, diplomacy stops. And now the biggest challenge for human community now is to restore confidence into diplomacy. You know, now in the last couple of years, how many times have you heard the word preventive diplomacy? It's gone out of vocabulary of diplomacy. But that's the job of diplomats and diplomacy. And we cannot go on further forgetting the existence of these ideas. And therefore, again, it will be hard, especially once this confrontational mood started. Getting back to the mood of talks will not be easy path.
Exactly.
But giving in and go a defeat of reason. So therefore, again, even what we're doing now, these sort of exchanges will be building this smaller country community so that we really talk, we really communicate. And, you know, it's okay to have differences as well. But, you know, even within your family, you have differences with your children. But when you have differences, you know, talking, communicating, irrespective of how difficult it is, to learn to communicate and to have this dialogue culture is the biggest civilizational, you know, achievement that we have. And it's not that we do not have it, but sometimes we are taken away, like obsessed with other form of communication. So therefore, I think, again, our cooperation in this field will be very important. And smaller countries, you know, there is no smaller country that is not next to superpowers. You know, basically all the countries have big countries right next to you, even if you do not have direct neighbor, historical relationships, this abstract presence of bigger countries is always there. So then having this, you know, when smaller countries communicate and make each other's case more vocal and stronger, that will be the strategy of Azerbaijan, Mongolia, in order to build the path for progress.
Yes, Mr. Mans, maybe you
it
can.
is very interesting to hear about the dialogue and confrontation, and you actually did it very good opposition to these two words, and they really went together, so we do not speak about the cooperation. Mr. Chok Batur, you're experienced diplomat, now represented at the parliament, and it will be very interesting to know your views about the international organization. You mentioned that we have big countries, large countries, we have small countries, so this is the matter of history. But we have international organizations, unions, councils who are eligible to be a guard of security, to be a guard of dialogue, cooperation. But unfortunately, some organizations now are not implementing their duties. So take it the United Nations, take the OSCE, take the Council of Europe and others. And don't you think it is high time to call for reforms within these organizations first? And don't you think we need, to call for cooperation between the organizations as well? For example, we see sometimes UN actually works with one of these organizations and ignores others in other parts of the world. And this is also, I think, disturbs the principles of equality and ultimately, again, disturbs the overall security system. Please, your standpoint on this issue.
Yes.
Yeah, we're living in an imperfect world, Probably heaven is the place of perfection. We're living on planet Earth, the planet of mortals, and therefore our world is not perfect. But that we have to, accept the fact that it may not be perfect. So the UN may not be perfect, but the UN is the best system that has grown out of much more violent world than we have now. It is a result of Second World War, and 50 million, at the cost of 50 million people, this organization was built in order to prevent. So therefore, if the UN is not perfect, that means We, the nations, are not perfect. The UN is only as good as the member states are. So the problem, I think, is this. I also believe that the UN system and international organizations need reform. But first and foremost, the existing system and the existing international law has to be respected by everyone, irrespective of the size. You know, during Cold War, we had this antagonistic system of zero-sum game. Both systems did not recognize, up to the end, they did not recognize the right to existence of each other. And because they could not win each other, they agreed on coexistence, but it didn't mean that they love each other. They just said, well, we neither can win, so let's coexist. And therefore, even when there was no war, the hatred, this irreconcilable confrontation was there. And yet, in this staunch, you know, the system was providing peace, dialogue, and talks between these staunch enemies. Now, today's world, compared to what we used to have in the Cold War era, has much better chances of talks, of diplomacy. But the problem is that with the end of Cold War, apparently all of us again went so euphoric, so naively hopeful that the era of war is over, we left them behind, and we started taking peace for granted. And therefore, you know, the UN was just, you know, because everybody has become friends, the UN's role, you know, with UN, without UN, because the job of the UN, first job is to preserve peace. So it, as if the peace was already there. Nobody could take it away. So why the UN? We started all of a sudden becoming, our generation, becoming arrogant to disrespect and underestimate UN. But if we were that perfect, then why at least not to ensure that imperfect system that our forefathers have created for us? We're not, today's generation, we're not living up even to the level of the UN that was created back in 1945. So the first thing is that let's start implementing and respecting the UN. Parallelly, yes, world is changing, and these changes have to be reflected in the institutional build-up of the UN, which means UN reform is needed. Otherwise, of course, it has its own imperfections, which start spreading the sense of unfairness, inequality. But, you know, if we really talk about equality, yes, by the law, by the UN Charter, all the countries are equal sovereigns. But again, the very UN Security Council and 5 permanent members, that also reflects the fact that the world is not equal. And it cannot be equal, and it will not be equal. So therefore, the UN system actually was a perfect system that both reflected both truth and tried to build the legal system that encompasses and tries to reconciliate this both, conflicting ideas. Therefore, for example, in our parliaments, we organized special session on the anniversary of UN Declaration on Human Rights, Universal Human Rights, and we called at that session for one thing: let's announced the year of the 2025 as the year of UN Charter. At least let's start with respecting what we already have. Because if we start respecting every letter of the UN Charter, we would not be having the conflicts that we're having today. At least let's start from this. Otherwise, yes, I agree with you. Reforms are needed. For example, OEC as well. The OEC was created to facilitate channel of communication among two irreconcilable antagonistic enemies. And Western Europe and Soviet Union could talk through these channels of communication. Because they were this different, diplomacy was needed. And this reality still exists today. This is the platform for diplomatic communication, and that we should be employing and using 100%. Whether we're using it 100%, no. And all the countries, bigger countries as well, should put efforts into rebuilding that communication.
Yes, Mr. Minister, very interesting points you have highlighted. This confrontation versus collaboration issue is very important, and preventive diplomacy. Also, unfortunately, we have forgotten about these terms, but it's above time that we return to the preventive diplomacy, the tools that we have. It is better to have diplomats talking rather than guns firing. So, Mr. Minister,
yes, that's right.
Yes, Mr. Minister, coming back to this economic matters, for example, as I've mentioned, Azerbaijan and Mongolia, though we have a small amount of, we are small countries compared to big powers, but we have our own resources to pressure, also to influence the world politics. For example, Azerbaijan is very important as a player in the middle corridor issue. Also, New Silk Road, which connects east with the west, and Mongolia, Azerbaijan can be very important players in this project. Actually, Mr. Minister is responsible person. Are you a rapporteur at the OSCE New Silk Road group? Are you a rapporteur of that?
I'm heading this fact-finding mission.
Fact-finding mission, yes.
Fact-finding mission on issues that are there, impairing the connectivity in the bigger Eurasian region. So I'm already, on the case of Mongolia, I started our research, and now I need to have more countries, of our Silk Road group to join in order to feed their, problems that they're facing. And then we will have bigger picture as to how the COVID situation influenced the connectivity in smaller countries, and how the conflicts are impacting the livelihood of peoples in those smaller countries along the Silk Road route.
Yes. So what I was trying to say Azerbaijan being a very important transit country, also the implementing different kind of projects, building communication and transport. Also, like as I've mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, Power of Siberia, Sila Sibiri project, also Soyuz Vostok pipeline, right, which is a project, Trans-Mongolia gas project to China with a capacity up to 50 billion cubic meters. This is very huge, frankly speaking, very huge project. And how you would evaluate these kind of projects influencing and helping economy in Mongolia. And also I would ask, last but not least, Sevil Hanım, you to comment on the importance of the, for example, transporting energy resources from Azerbaijan from Caspian to European markets. Also, we playing as a transit country for the Central Asian countries to transport their oil and gas resources to Europe via Azerbaijan. So it means that as a transit countries, Mongolia and Azerbaijan actually are very important. Maybe, would you like to comment first?
Yes, why not? Yes, you're right. In terms of connectivity, Azerbaijan actually plays a very important role now in Eurasia, so because of its geographical location. But I want to mention that not only geographical position, but Azerbaijan could in time build its transportation routes, and there are routes, railways, also seaports, which now helps other countries to use and to benefit from the system that Azerbaijan created. You know, we are in a difficult location, our geography quite complicated because of our neighbors. We are surrounded by oil and gas transporting countries. They are producers, but even independently of this factor, Azerbaijan could realize giant oil and gas transporting routes projects. And now the European Union and our partners in Europe are very happy with these routes because they serve as an alternative to the northern routes, and they bring Caspian oil and gas to the European Union. But as we all know, we have huge resources in Central Asia, and they are very actually big, and the potential is high. And now coming out from the increasing demand in the European Union for oil and gas, and not in Europe, I think in the eastern direction as well, so in Eurasia overall, because the economies grow, demography is high, and of course demand is increasing. Now Azerbaijan actually came out with an offer to increase the capacities of the transportation routes. And now we are working with the Central Asian countries and of course China and Mongolia are on this route as well. And I think One Belt, One Route project will be successful and bring benefits to all the nations that are located on this route. You know, we have good location, we have a high level of resources, raw material, and now high demand, as I mentioned. But what we need to do to realize this potential, and again we are turning back to ideas. We need political stability in these countries because the political instability actually impedes the implementation of these projects. And now after solution of Karabakh conflict, there is a very good opportunity for all countries, because if we open Zengezur road, Zengezur corridor. Ultimately, this is 42 kilometers in long, but it will be part of the middle corridor, which will be the major arteria in Eurasia, bringing goods from east to west and vice versa. So in this occasion, I want to say that yes, we need to work together. Be it big countries, be it small countries, it doesn't matter, but we need to have a will for cooperation, and I think the countries now demonstrate their will also, because for the Silk Road we saw the same interest, and other routes are also in the process of implementation. And I want to mention here TAPI, which is very success because it could bring goods from Europe and transport to India. So, the huge potential for the Eastern Asian countries. And now we need to focus, and Azerbaijan actually focused on this direction. We have very good relations with Central Asian countries, with China in particular, with Mongolia. And we need to boost and, to define the gaps in this sphere so that to eliminate them timely and to go forward.
Yes, Mr. Minister, Sevil Hanım, highlighted important aspects of transport and communication links, this connectivity. So, Mr. Minister, maybe you can wrap up with your ideas, because Mongolia and Azerbaijan, we are landlocked countries, but this landlocked position cannot and must not be the impediment before other countries. If we are engaged with this transport, building up transport, communication links, connectivity, so world is getting more globalized every passing time. So we need to be an active partner, player in this geo-economic terms. So your final thoughts about these issues like Sila Sibiri, South Vostok, New Silk Road, this this middle corridor issue which connects west with the east. So please.
Yep. Yeah, the fact that we're landlocked countries, there are 32, 33 landlocked countries in the world. And as Marcus Aurelius once said, the life is what we see and how we see it. So if we see it as weakness, it will be weakness. But if we see it as strength or as a normal situation which can be improved, then we can achieve it. For example, countries like Austria or Switzerland, they're also landlocked, but do they talk about their landlockedness as their impairment? No, because they developed infrastructure to connect bigger markets. And they're earning a lot on the fact that they're right on that, on the crossroads, connecting these bigger markets. So this location can be a geographical strength of our countries. And once we become this important communication and logistical hub, this will be not only economic benefit and advantage, but it will be also strategic strength of our countries. So therefore, when I look at Azerbaijan and what you're doing in terms of building your infrastructure and also portraying yourself as a hub country that communicates, Caucasus with Eastern Europe and Central Asia, South Asia, that's your strength. And because you started seeing yourself as such, you started building the infrastructure in order to live up to what you see. And it is already becoming your strength. And that's what we also want to do, because, you talked about Silk Road. Up until the opening of maritime routes, the Silk Road was going next to Mongolia or through Mongolia. It was changing its routes, but we were geographically one of the important components of that Silk Road. And this was giving us, all the economies in between, a very important strategically located, markets. And with this invent of Belt and Road, it was initially announced back in 2013 in Kazakhstan. It was first designed and announced as the Trans-Eurasian route that will be connecting Asia with Europe. And for the first time in the last 500 years, this competitive advantage could come back to continental countries like Mongolia, because such a big economy like China started giving importance to continental routes, not only maritime routes. Maritime, Silk Road, and Belt and Road idea is there, but they also, in addition to that, they started giving priority and significance to transcontinental route. This was a very welcome thing for us as well, because then after 500 years, this importance given to transcontinental route is coming back. This opportunity and chance is coming back to us. We should grab it. And therefore, for example, our president, when he was, campaigning for the presidency, his program included this concept of transit Mongolia, because that includes all the transit communication infrastructure that needs to be built, and it's multi-layer, connectivity and infrastructure system that we're talking about: railroads, gas and energy, transit pipelines and infrastructure, electricity electricity transmission lines, auto roads, motorways, etc. So track highways. So as you're doing in your end, we're also trying to do and build this infrastructural capacity in Mongolia so that we could benefit out of this growing trade between Asia and Europe. And for that purpose, we are very strategically located, because when goods from certain parts of China and East Asia through Chinese ports are transported to Europe, and it will be the shortest route from Asia to Europe. And therefore, these opportunities need to be employed to the fullest extent possible in order to contribute to our economy.
Mr. Minister, absolutely brilliant thoughts. I like the idea of saying that landlockedness cannot and must not play as an impediment. We have to transfer the being as a landlocked country into our strengths. Actually, the scholars, the very famous scholars of geopolitics, Haushofer, Mackenzie, they said that, for example, bigger Eurasian continent used to be a very important geographic area in the world politics, because this Silk Road, historic Silk Road project, it was passing through the deserts, through the continents. Even now, today, what we are seeing, the developments in the Middle East, the obstacles created through the sea transport routes, you understand, the situation, again makes us to rethink the idea of coming back and promoting and investing on the connectivity and transport communication links through the continents, like New Silk Road, like Middle Corridor. So it means that not always maritime routes are safe. Actually, we are in the stage that nothing is safe unless you invest onto it and unless you struggle to do your job better. So, Mr. Minister, thank you very much. Again, I hope that, first, frankly speaking, it was one of the conversations, brilliant conversations with deep intellectual thoughts that I have enjoyed our conversation. And I thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and I thank you very much, Ms. Sevil Mikhailova.
Thank you for this opportunity.
And let's connect the dots. Let's connect Mongolia with Azerbaijan. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day.